Hi guys, and welcome back to the third part of my Tic Tac Toe in Pygame series. In the last video I focused on creating event handlers for mouse clicks, and I used those to determine which cell the player had clicked into, and based on that I was placing the correct player's marker. But if you remember, there was no end game condition, so it was possible to create a row or create three in a row and keep playing afterwards. So what I'm going to focus on in this final video is adding in an additional function which is going to be looking for that win condition. And once that's been reached, I'll give the player the option to, well, first of all, I'll display who has won. I will end the game so they're not able to continue placing markers. And lastly, I'll give the option to play again, which will reset the board entirely. Okay, so to begin, I'm going to start by defining my check winner function. So I'll create this somewhere down here, just above my main loop. So I'll say define check winner. And essentially all I'm going to be doing here is, again, scrolling through or iterating over my markers list. And I'm going to be looking for certain winning combinations. So I'm going to start off with, as usual, for X in markers, which is going to be my for loop through that list. So I'm going to go through it in order. I'll first of all check the columns for a winning combination, then the rows, and then lastly the cross. So I'll start by saying check columns. So because this loop is going to be giving me X values of a list, the way to check is by simply summing up whatever is in that list. So if player 1 has put his markers in each of those points, then that's going to mean that each of those values is a 1. So if we total them all up, I should get a 3. So if there's a 3 in any of these sums, it means that all of those points belong to player 1. And this is why I used -1 for player 2, because I can do the same thing, but if the sum is -3, then I know the player 2 has won. So I'm going to do this by just adding sums. So if sum x equals 3, then I can say that the winner is player 1. And I'm going to have to define this variable above. And I'll also add a game over condition. So I'll say game over equals true. Now I'll begin by defining these variables first of all. So winner is no one to start with, and game over is false to start with. So the next one then is to check if player 2 has won. So I'll copy this down and indent. If sum x equals -3, then winner is player 2. So this is where it could get a little confusing. I've reverted back to calling it winner is 2 and winner is 1. So again, that will make sense when I come to print the player or print who the winner is, but it could be a little bit confusing as I'm referring to as -1 earlier on in the code. So that's going to check all the columns, and now I'm going to check through the rows. And the way to do this is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to have to iterate again. So I'm going to say if markers 0, which is my X, and Y position. So I need to define this again up here. I'll start it off as 0, just so that I've got an empty variable. Y position equals 0. So if this plus, and I'm just going to add these up, plus markers 1. So I'm essentially just moving along my X plus markers 2. So same as above, but I'm just moving in the other direction. If this equals 3, then I copy over this condition. So player 1 has won that one. And now I can repeat this again, but I'm going to set the sum to -3. And I'll say the winner is player 2. Okay, so that's created my rows and columns. So the only other thing to do is add in my crosses. But before I do that, I need to just close out this variable. So the point of adding y pause at the start is that as I iterate through my markers, I want to increase y pause. So it's going to be plus equals 1. So on the next iteration, I move along, and essentially I'm going to be checking the next level within this list. So that's my columns and rows, and now check cross. However, I want to be doing this outside of that for loop. It's just part of the function. This is going to be a little bit simpler. I'll just type out the code. I'm essentially just going across top left to bottom right, and then bottom left to top right. So if markers 0, 0, so top left plus markers 1, 1, which is the center, plus markers 2, 2. Oops. 2, 2. So if these sum up to 3, or checking in the other direction, markers, and I will start over on the other side, 2, 2 down to 0, 2 equals 3, and then it's the same condition. Winner is player 1, and game over is true. So now I repeat this for my second player. So again, it's now going to be -3, and winner is going to be player 2. So the other thing to mention is I've got these winner and game over variables in here. I've got them within the function, but I'm also going to be feeding them out, plus they are defined globally to start with. So I'm going to just add in here global winner and global game over. So it means that these are, rather than being local variables to check winner function, they're global variables to the whole program. And now I can call this check winner function, and I'm going to call it down here just after I apply, or rather after I click on any cell and put in a new marker. So we'll check for a winner at this point. So the reason that I wanted to have the game over variable global is that I'm now going to use it in here. So if you remember, the problem I had before was that it was possible to just keep clicking and keep putting markers down in every cell. So I want to stop being able to do that. Now I've still got my event handler, and I still want to have the option to quit anytime, but I only want to be checking through my mouse clicks within the any of the markers if the game is running. So I'll say if game over is 0, only then do I want to be running through all of these checks. So I'll indent this. So it just means that none of this is going to be happening as soon as one of the players has won. It's going to set game over to 1, and we won't be able to go through this iteration or this logic anymore. So I've got that much defined, and I'm just going to run the code to see if this works, and just in case I've made any mistakes. All right, so I'll try. Okay, yeah, so I'm able to play, and now you see I've made a cross, and it's not possible to continue placing any more markers down. So there is no feedback, unfortunately, at this point. I don't have any way to actually say that someone has won, and there's no reset button or no play again button. All I can do is quit. So that's what I'm going to do next. What I want to do is create a function that's going to display who the winner is. And I'm going to define that just underneath check winner. So I'm going to call this one define draw winner. Winner. All right, so I want to display some kind of text onto the screen, first of all, to say player has won. So in Pygame, you can't just output text directly onto the screen. You have to take the text and then you have to convert it to an image, and then you show the image on the screen. So first of all, I'm going to create the text. I'll call it win text equals player plus the string of winner space wins. So I've declared who the winner is. Now I just need to convert that to text. Before we do that, I have to define a font. So I'm going to come up here where I've defined everything else, and I will define font. And I'm going to type font equals pygame.font.sysfont. And I'm going to set a size of 40. So that's my font defined. I'm not giving it a specific type of font. I just needed to initialize something in here. I can now go back to my draw winner function, and then I've got that font defined. I can convert this text to an image. So I'll say win image equals font render my text, font text, and I need to give it a color. So let's say blue. I'll just check if I've defined it. I haven't defined the blue yet, so I'll call it blue equals 00255. So now to put this text or this image onto the screen, use a function called blit. So I specify first of all my display, which is called screen, dot blit, and then I select my image, so it's win image, and now I need to enter a position for it. So for now, I mean, you could be precise in this, but I'm just going to type in kind of central. So I'm going to say screen width floor division here, floor divided by 2, and I'll move it over to the left a bit because I don't want it to start in the center, because then it'll move over to the right quite a lot. And then screen height, again, floor divided by 2, and this time minus 50, so it starts a little bit higher up. So what this will do is it'll print out player 1 or player 2 wins in the color blue over the screen, but it's kind of going to contrast against the background. So I want something like a rectangle of a different color behind this text, just so it stands out a little bit more. So that's what I'm going to add in now. I'll just use the Pygame draw rect function again. So as usual, I'll define it to my screen, give it a color of green, and I'm going to give it a start point. So I'll make a start pretty much in the same place as the text. So screen width divided by 2 minus 100, and screen height divided by 2. I'll say a little bit higher up, minus 60. And then I'll give it a width of 200 and a height of 50. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call this function. But first, what I've noticed is I've got this variable in here, but it's not a local variable to the function, so I actually need to add that in here as one of the arguments. So now I can call the draw winner function, and I only want that to be called when someone has won, right? And at that point, my game over is set to 1. So I can easily check for that condition by coming back into my while loop and saying if game over is true, so if someone has won, then draw winner. And I'm going to put in the winner variable as the argument. So let's just check whether this has worked. There we go. Okay, so it's given me the correct output. Player 1 was crosses and player 1 is 1. But again, I still don't have any way of interacting and restarting the game. So that's the last step. That's what I'm going to do now. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my draw winner function, and I want to add a second line of text. And this is going to be play again. So I'm just going to call this again text equals play again question mark. I'm going to turn this into an image. So again image equals font render again text true, and I'm going to go with the color blue again for this one. And I'm going to show this on the screen as well. So same as above, screen.blit again image, and I'm going to show this screen width divided by 2 minus 80, and it's going to be a little bit lower down beneath the winner text, so plus 10. So what this is going to do is the same as above, but now it's going to print out play again underneath it. But I want this to be a clickable button, and I want it to actually do something, some kind of function. So Pygame has these rectangles that we can draw with the draw rect function, but it's possible to actually declare or create a variable and define that as a rectangle. And that gives me more options a little bit later on, because it means that I can use further functions within Pygame to detect if that rectangle is being clicked on. So I'm going to create this play again rectangle, and I'm just going to go up here where all my variables are, and I'm just going to say in here create again rectangle, play again rectangle, and I'm going to say again rect equals, and I use the Pygame rect function, and what I need to feed in here basically is just the start position, the width, and height. So I'm going to say screen width 5x2. I'm going to pretty much copy more or less what I've defined for the play again text. So then screen height 2. I think that's where I put it. Plus 10. Yeah, so I want the box to start above it, so it kind of envelops it. And then I want it to be 160 wide and 50 tall. So that's created my rectangle and stored it in this again rect variable. So I go back to draw winner, and before I split that image, I want to put in my rectangle. So just the same as before, Pygame draw rect, and to define the screen, define the color, and this time all I need to do is put in that variable, again rect. So for the last bit then, I've now got this function of draw winner, and I define it here, or rather I call it here. So I'm just going to just double check that it works fine still. Okay, so there we go. There's my both of my texts. It's still not clickable, but I know that it's defined. I know it's there. So that's the last bit to add. I'm going to put this all into here, and I'm just going to put a comment that I'm going to check for mouse click to see if user has clicked on play again. And it's going to be very much the same as what I've got above. So I'm just going to copy this down and correct the indentation. So if event type is if we've clicked, then just click to true again as before. And if we release and click is still true, now this is where I actually carry out the game logic. So I'll set click to false again. I want to get the position of the mouse. So I'm just going to copy this again rather than typing it. I've got my mouse position. And this is where that function comes in. So if that rectangle from before, again rect, and I'm going to use the Pygame collide point function and feed in the mouse position. So basically at the point of the click, if that mouse was within the boundaries of that rectangle, then I want to execute the code for playing again. And all that's going to be is I just want to reset my variables. So I can pretty much just go back up here where I've defined them to start with. I can just bring them all down and see which ones I need. So player goes back to player 1. Line width, I don't actually need that to be redefined. I reset my markers list, so everything goes back to 0. Clicked is already false, so I don't need to define that. And player 1, no winner, and game over is false. So the final thing to do now that I've reset everything, remember markers is now an empty list, but I need all those zeros to be populated. So I'm going to go back up here where, it was here that I created them in the first place, and I'm just going to paste this in. Now in reality, you would want to make this some kind of function so that you can just call it whenever you need it, and as the code gets more complicated, that is what you would do. But here I'm just going to copy it and paste. So I think that should be everything. I'm just going to run it just to check. All right, let's try this. There we go. So I'll let, whoops, I was trying to let player 2 in this time. Okay, so that's it. That's pretty much all the code, and not overly complicated. Essentially, I've got it going from creating the grid, creating all the lines, looking for mouse clicks for which cell we've clicked in, alternating players as you go, and then it's looking for a win condition, at which point it stops the game and it declares the winner and it gives you the option to start again. So that's pretty much it, and I hope that was useful, and thanks for watching.